Join Paranormal M, where spine-chilling tales and thrilling mysteries collide. Subscribe and stay connected to weekly stories that'll leave you in awe. The unknown is calling. Will you answer? The Duplex Diaries. Becoming a Believer. In my hometown, there are loads of restored Victorian houses. The city is very strict with them. Any renovation, or certain parts of town at least, they have to be approved by a historical preservation committee. So it raised questions when I saw that this house was a duplex. We lived in the lower unit. It was frickin' gorgeous. The house was over 100 years old with hand-carved wood molding and mostly original floors. You could tell what was part of the original structure and what was added on to make the duplex. Josh's room, the full bathroom, and my room were the addition. My room would have been built onto the closet underneath the stairs. The living room and dining room had all original wood floors. They restored them the best that they could, but there was a 5-foot dark stain in the living room, and a similar mark in a large corner of the dining room. The landlord told us, "There's only so much you can do with these old houses." And we did understand. We were lucky to get such a lovely place, with a modest rent in a cool part of town. I was the first one to notice the weird vibe in the house. When friends would come over, I would ask them. They would feel it too. Most of them agreed. Whenever I was in the kitchen, I felt like I was being watched from behind. Watched hard, like stared down even. Every time I turned to look, my eye would get drawn to the same spot in the doorway, directly above the big dark stain in the dining room. I tried to tell myself that it was probably not real, but it felt like my brain was picking up on the stimuli that couldn't be detected by my eyes. The only knowledge of dealing with the paranormal is to not let them push you around. Take strict dominance. You have to establish boundaries, since you truly don't know what you're dealing with, and the fear gives them the upper hand. I said out loud that I acknowledged their presence and I'm allowing them to exist in the same space as I do. But that could always be revoked. I paid rent, so I had seniority. That feeling of being watched started showing up at random times when I would just be in the room soon after. It wasn't just that anymore either. You know how sometimes you can tell a person is nearby before they make any indication that they're even there? It was kind of like that. I stared at the spot where it originated from, but there was nothing there. It felt like someone was peeking their head around the corner, just like in the kitchen. This would happen for short periods before fading away behind the wall. It would happen like that every so often throughout the night. Pretty much every night. And every time it happened, I was reflexively skeptical and told myself, "Nah, that's not real." I repeated that mantra more and more often in the coming months. In October, it finally got cold enough for us to turn the central heating on. My roommate mentioned to make sure our vents were open. I looked at my room and I saw mine were shut. Once I realized this, I guess you could say a pit opened up at the bottom of my stomach. This meant all the times I saw my Christmas lights hanging up around my room, and I know I was in my early 20s and admittedly awful, was gently swaying. It wasn't caused by the air moving through the vents. Also, we had no air conditioner. Well, none that could have been moving them at least. It was caused by something else. The presence continued to emerge off and on. I chalked it up to my active imagination, since it didn't seem like my other roommates were affected by it. At some point, I even talked to the neighbors upstairs who told me that they also felt a weirdness about this place. One night, when I had a friend over in my room, I was walking through the living room, turning off all the lights. I turned around the final one, turned that off, and started back toward my room in the dark. As I was passed over the stain in the living room, I heard a voice behind me. It was gentle and almost subtle, with an upward inflection like it was asking a question. I whipped around, and I was just met with nothing. But I heard firm footsteps approaching me from the corner. I noped into my room where my friend was sitting. He asked what my problem was, and I told him the house might be haunted. He laughed at me and told me to get real. Not 2 minutes later, he goes, "Did you see that?" I asked, "See what, buddy?" He said my hula hoop jumped off the wall where it was hanging. He stared at it intensely, trying to formulate a rational explanation for what he saw. Don't think he ever found one. And this was one of the most witnessed events in that house. We had a crew of people over watching something engaging when we heard glass shatter in the kitchen. Heard something engaging? A handful of us stood up and went to the kitchen where the light fixture above the sink was shattered in the sink basin. Out of seemingly nowhere, it had detached itself from the ceiling and exploded. We passed it off as a freak accident. One of us got in touch with the landlord and we carried on with the night. I kept feeling the presence studying me, so I tried to figure out what kind of entity I was dealing with. Granted, I had no experience or even understanding of the paranormal, only what I'd seen in the media. When I opened my mind and tried to be receptive, I got some tentative information. And once again, this all could just be a figment of my imagination. I'm perfectly okay with being wrong. It was a girl, a younger girl, possibly a preteen. The number 14 was something that was coming to mind. She was blonde with curly hair, wearing an old-school sailor outfit. She may have lived in the house before it became 2 units. The personality I got was a timid, curious child who suffered greatly and died in fear. I was dying to learn the history of that place, but I had no idea where to even start. In my casual research on it, I was disappointed that my state has no laws stating you have to disclose somebody dying in a house. Strange occurrences started to become routine. I thought that we reached the peak of activity and I didn't have really my guard up at all. And so one night, I'm just on my laptop, Christmas lights hanging right next to my bed. Then they get lifted drastically off the wall for like a split second. It looked like an invisible force playfully tossed it upward. At that moment, I decided to revoke her access to my space. I said out loud that she was no longer welcome to my room. Thinking in haste, I scrolled through my minimal mental archive of the subject to remember what can be used against ghosts on TV. Salt. I needed salt. As quickly as possible, I retrieved the salt from the kitchen. I poured it in the door frame above the threshold. I felt more comfortable that I had a defensive barrier, but also wasn't sure if it would work. It was difficult to sleep that night. After I placed the salt, I stopped experiencing unexplainable things in my room. I still felt like I was being watched, but only in the kitchen. Things were mild now, and I thought I had nothing to worry about. This has been a learning experience for me, and I wanted to document what happened so I could explain to people why I believe in ghosts. So I took my notebook into the living room. I started to write. As usual, I felt something peeking around the corner, but this time it was more pronounced. At least more pronounced than any previous instance. Did she know what I was writing about her? My roommate sat down next to me. I told him what I was even doing, and it was almost like I was in a mid-sentence, and directly behind where I sat, the couch under us moved. It felt like somebody slowly picked it up by the corner and put it down. I immediately jumped up and ran outside. A few months after our lease was up, I was hanging out with one of my former roommates. The topic of the creepy feeling in our house came up in conversation. That's when she told me there was a fire long ago. I'm not sure how she learned this, but a lot of things made sense. Like the fact that it's a duplex and the burn marks on the floor. Is it possible that those burn marks were caused by burning flesh? Did the spirit who remained there die before their time? Was this just a series of coincidences? Will I ever get answers to my questions? I'm a see it to believe it type. Everything comes with a grain of salt, and I ask critical questions. Early humans evolved to recognize patterns for survival. It's the reason we see the Virgin Mary's face on a piece of burnt toast. Thought it was Jesus on that toast. Anyway, they also have the ability to sense when they're being watched. There has to be a reason these traits survived in us after millions of years. I would say there's plenty to watch out for even today, paranormal or not. Caution: shadow people crossing. My partner and I were driving to a friend's house to visit for a little while. It's a very short, maybe 5 to 10 minute drive through busy suburbs that are usually very well lit. However, as we came upon what we call the halfway point between our houses, we stopped at a red light. I noticed that the street lights seemed to be dimmed on the other side of the intersection. Not all of them, but a series of maybe 3 or 4 lights on either side of the street. It was creating a very shadowy stretch of road about 40 feet long. I'm not insinuating that the lights being dimmed was in itself paranormal. I know nothing of how such public utilities work, and, well, sure it's some sort of power-saving procedure or some such. But in this instance it was strange, as we've gone the same route many times, and specifically at the same time of night. Never noticed them being dimmed. Whatever the case, the lights were dimmed, and though it was dark, I could make out a figure of a person shuffling across the street. I believe I could even see the outlines of clothing on this person. They were wearing very baggy pants and a large coat like a trench coat or a cowboy's duster. This person shuffled across the street from right to left about 75 feet ahead of us, seemed to turn to walk towards us. Then they reached the other side. I said to my partner, "It's so dark, I could barely see him up there." To which my partner replied, "See who?" Which is normal for her, as she doesn't really have the best night vision. And I was actually kind of expecting this response. So when the light turned green, I intended to point them out as we were passing them. But as we passed by the bit of sidewalk this person should have been walking on, there was absolutely nothing. The headlights should have briefly passed over them with the angle of the road as we left the red light, but the light shone through the couple of low-hanging branches hanging across the sidewalk and revealed no one. It was as if whatever it was just melted into the sidewalk once it got across. I was more confused than anything at first. This person that I clearly saw just seemingly popped out of existence. I just sat there and said, "Huh? And what the fuck was that?" That was the rest of the way there, about 2 or more minutes in the car. Wasn't particularly frightening or even remotely threatening or even direct. It was just a moment that made me stop and actually ask myself what I'd just seen. I haven't posted any of my experiences in a while, and I realized that sharing my experiences was extremely cathartic, and often helped me make more sense of them. The Strange Woods of Maine. As a child growing up in the backwoods of Maine, I've heard my fair share of strange things in the night. Typically, it'll be coyotes hunting or the prowl of another nocturnal creature. As a child, I was never particularly afraid of the dark, but I knew dangers lurked in the absence of light, so at night I played indoors. During the daytime, however, there were never any restrictions. On one summer afternoon, I was riding my bike down the street. It branched off my dead-end road. Our only neighbors being a relative and a couple of decent folk just down the way. Otherwise, quiet, just woods. I would make this ride quite often. There was no town, but this stretch was fun to ride because I could pedal my heart out without having to slow down in order to veer. And on this day, I made my normal round up the road only to turn around and head back. I had an uneasy feeling on the ride up, which was the only abnormality. I felt like I was being watched. Something told me to look toward the woods on my right, and I did so reluctantly. Deep in the woods amongst the pines, I saw a black, almost liquid thing peer out from behind a tree. My heart dropped. I took off pedaling as fast as my feet would take me, keeping a steady eye on the woods to my right. This thing kept pace effortlessly, was darting from tree to tree like a primordial ooze. It was either playing or stalking prey, and I wasn't about to stop and find out. Pedaling so hard, I was just basically thought my chain would snap, and I knew my uncle's house was approaching on the left. I spun out in the dirt, ditched the bike, and ran to his door, frantically knocking. I turned around to see if whatever it was would be making its way toward me. I didn't see anything, though. My uncle opened the door, cigarette in his mouth, asking me what's wrong. I explained to him what I saw, and he grabbed a rifle and said, "Probably just a bear," with a little bit of a slight concern in his voice. "I've never seen a bear move like that," I said. "Yep, they'll do that," he said as he peered through the blinds. To this day, I don't know what I saw, but something tells me my uncle sure did. It's been 20 years, and I've since lost contact with my uncle. Maybe someday I'll reach out and ask. To be fair, he might think bears move like that. The long hallway on Macedonia Road. As a child, you're more susceptible to the supernatural, and there's always the adults that don't listen. I get it, kids have wild imaginations, and this house was no imagination, though. This house was dated with what felt like the longest hallway. Also, to make matters worse, there was an old family cemetery in the woods behind the house, but of course I was never told that until we had already moved out of the house. That's because my mom didn't want to scare me. With that being said, you would think she would have taken my experiences that I had there to heart and maybe not have brushed me off. But hey, I was just a kid. Here are two of the most startling experiences I and my brother had. 1. I turned off my Walkman and removed my headphones, gathered my towel, and headed to the bathroom. The shower was warm. The steam was rolling. The bathroom was painted white, and all the appliances in the bathroom were white also, down to the white shower curtain. It made me feel safe because it was so bright. I was humming BSB while thinking about what song I wanted to listen to when I was done showering. Suds all over my hair and face, my eyes closed. I turned toward the shower head and rinsed my head and then turned away from the shower head, and just as I was turning, I saw a hand imprint scrape the shower curtain on the outside. An adult-sized hand. Called out to my mom and told her that I'm almost done because I was kind of used to get all fussed at for taking long showers. She didn't answer me, but I knew I better hurry my butt up. Finished rinsing off, turned off the shower, opened the shower curtain, and the bathroom was still so steamy, and the door was shut. I thought that was odd considering my mom had just come in there and didn't hear the door close back. Also, the steam would have escaped, so I got a little bit panicked and hurried up and wrapped my towel around me. Sprinted out of the bathroom and into my room, it was right across the hall, and quickly shut my bedroom door. I got dressed real fast, and just as I was about to go out of my bedroom door, I heard footsteps outside of my bedroom. I backed up, and then I heard my brother say my name. So I opened my door, and he was at my door. He saw the panicked look on my face and just told him what had happened. And as a big brother normally would, he told me that I was just imagining things. That line he told me soon changed courses for the next experience. Story number 2. One night I'm listening to my Walkman. My brother busts into the room, panicked, and looks at me and says, "That's very funny. You must have ran fast to get back in here." With the most confused look on my face, I said, "What are you even talking about? I haven't been out of my room since we ate dinner." He told me that he was sitting in his room and he heard footsteps approach his door. And then somebody knocked on his door very loudly. So I reminded him that Mom and Dad were home and it might have just been them, just maybe trying to see what he was up to. But he said that as soon as the knock happened, he just jumped out of his bed and ran toward the door and opened it because it startled him. Apparently no one was there. His room and my parents' room were at a dead end of the hallway. My bedroom and the bathroom were at the front of the hallway. And this hallway was long. So I told him there was no way I could have ran that far to my room, shut my door, throw on my headphones, and be that settled into my bed. So we both walked out of my room and walked to the front of the house. And there we found both of our parents sleeping in the living room. Dad in his chair, Mom on the couch with a blanket on top of her. We didn't go back to our rooms until we woke both of them up and they walked back with us to the hallway. What scared me the most about this house was the mirror at the very end of the hallway. I asked my mom to take that down, but she just giggled every time. I saw a woman in that mirror behind me one night. My brother was never fond of that mirror either. But after that night, after the night he experienced, it was a creepy house, I'll just put it that way. And I've lived in a few haunted houses in North Carolina. The House on Mary Hill. The house has 2 stories. Honestly, a beautiful house. Had a big yard and even clotheslines in the backyard. Downstairs was shaped really cool. It was like a big circle, basically. The kitchen was massive and the area where the bedrooms downstairs were open with the access point upstairs. Excuse me. Upstairs was where our parents' room was and a guest bedroom. My parents chose the room to the left, leaving the room to the right unoccupied. The house felt safe up until one night. I was sitting in my bedroom with my bedroom door open. I could see into my brother's room across the way. I was reading a book sitting Indian style in my bed when I saw out of the corner of my eye somebody running straight across the front of my bedroom door and into the bathroom. I jumped and looked up and saw my brother still sitting at his desk, who looked pretty undisturbed. I yelled out to him, "Did you see that?" He looked up and said, "Whatever it was, I don't even want to think about it." So we never spoke of that again. But we started closing our bedroom doors. After a while, my mom's friend needed a place to stay. So she opened the door to her. She stayed in the guest bedroom upstairs. She was a really cool woman and stayed to herself mostly. After a few weeks, she started to hang out downstairs more often, and she seemed like she was all tired all the time. But we got close, and she would watch my brother and me with our parents when they weren't home. Or rather, watch me when our parents weren't home. So one night, I was in her room, and we were talking about stuff, and I told her about that one night my brother and I saw something run across the way, and she froze up. Said that there was something in this house, and that she doesn't like to sleep in this room, and that the room she was staying in was always cold. So we stopped talking about scary stuff, just ended up watching some TV and actually passed out in her bed with her. I woke up and it was dark, freezing cold too. And there over the top of me was a very dark figure. It seemed so angry. I nudged her and she said very slightly, "I see it. Close your eyes and it'll go away." I closed my eyes and I started crying. But as fast as it had appeared, it was also disappeared. She jumped out of the bed, flipped the light on, and we ran downstairs to my room. She slept in the room with me that night. The next morning I went to my mom, and with her, and we just told her what happened. This time she believed me and told me that she has felt a presence in this house as well, and then proceeded to tell me and her friend that the last owner committed suicide in the bedroom. That was the bedroom her friend was staying in. She told us that the bullet hole is still visible in the wall. My color left my face. I told her that I saw that mark on the wall last night when I was in the room with her friend. So her friend left the house. Completely understandable. It wasn't even the next week yet when me and my brother were playing outside. It was dark, but we had a very bright street light that lit up the yard, and you could see the whole side of the house. I told my brother what Mom told me and said that, that explains a lot of the things that, he's seen and heard. Had my back turned to the house picking up the ball that we were tossing back and forth. And when turned around, he was staring up at the guest bedroom window, stone cold still. I looked up and saw what had him so frightened. It was a dark figure of a man, and he was standing in the window with his hand up against his head, holding a gun. We ran inside and we were panicked. Our mom took us to my brother's room. That's because her dad was not happy with our antics. She told us that she will do everything she can to convince our dad to move. Months passed, and one night we're all sitting in the living room, and my dad's chair was the closest to the side door of the house. He was sitting in his chair, and something caught his eye to his right, and he turned his head really fast, jumped out of his chair, and swung the door open. Well, no one was there, as you might guess. He swore up and down that he saw a man standing at the door outside, but there simply wasn't. We moved out of that house 2 weeks later, and never looked back. A Tale from the Skeptic. Here's a little backstory for you. My wife and I were married after a 5-year courtship on January 1st, 2010. There were good times and there were some bad ones too. I won't go into many details, but during the course of our relationship, she suffered a major back injury. While she was recovering from this, she got addicted to opioids. Hydromorphone, to be exact. She got addicted hard. It overtook her life in several years. I tried to be understanding, I tried to help her myself, but when it became too much for me to handle on my own or deal with at all anymore, I demanded that she either seek professional help for her problem or her marriage was done. She did the typical addict things. She denied, she got mad, but finally she accepted. She checked herself into a detox facility for about a month. She struggled, but she succeeded. She left that facility and went straight into a full-blown rehab. 28 days later, she was home, clean and sober for the first time in years. We reestablished our relationship and fell in love all over again. Things were great for the next several months. We got to know each other all over again, too. It was great. That was until it wasn't. On May 2nd, 2018, she relapsed. I learned the following from reading her personal journals after she passed away. She'd been having some back pains again, and had been fighting the urge to start using drugs for the pain again. She had been fighting silently for a couple of weeks. When she broke down and relapsed, the drug she relapsed with was fentanyl. Bastards. She died within moments of a relapse. That was the only thing that was found in her system at the time of her passing. I was devastated. I spent the next months running on autopilot, and no need to get into that here. One thing I failed to mention was that my wife was an incredible cook and baker. I've been keeping in close contact with her family ever since her passing. One of the common themes during the holidays was how much they missed her baking and knowing that they would never get her treats during the holidays again. So this year I decided to try my hand at it. I'm not a kitchen adept at all, not even close. But I had her recipes and figured, what the fuck, let's try it. So off to the store I go. I load up on all the ingredients as per her recipes and fire up the stove. I spent 2 days making treats and dropping them off with her parents and brother and 2 sisters. Everyone was happy with the treats. There were some good conversations and a couple of tears. After everything, I went home and started cleaning up the mess. As I was standing in front of the sink doing the last of the dishes, I felt a hand. Not an object, a hand, like a palm and 5 separate distinct fingers on my lower back. It startled me so much I screamed and took a jump back and looked around. There was nobody there, but I was suddenly overtaken with a sense of calm. I just felt right. I've never had something like that happen to me before. A few days later, I'm laying in bed just dozing off almost asleep. That's when I felt something crawl into bed with me. I felt it crawl right beside me. I swung my hand back thinking it was our cat, and nothing there, nothing at all. I lay there awake for a while, hoping for something more, but still feeling that same calming warmth. Same warmth I had days earlier in the kitchen, before I fell asleep and whispered, "Thank you, I miss you, and I love you." Haven't had any more experiences since, but I'm no longer a skeptic. Those ones are sad, but I like those the most. Just me. Rubbing my eyes now. My mother stayed with me, even after she died. For a little while, my 8-year-old life seemed pretty happy. Normal. That is until my mother fell very ill with breast cancer. My stubborn 8-year-old mind hadn't realized the danger my mother was in. I wish I had. Maybe then I could have understood what was happening a little bit better. Mom was too weak to walk up the second floor of our house and get to her bedroom. So naturally, my dad moved their bed downstairs into the family room. As my mom lay bedridden, unconscious and ill, strange things would happen as I lay with her. I would feel a presence, almost like I was being watched. Even as a little kid, I'd always be petrified of anything to do with ghosts. I was always afraid of being anywhere alone in the house. So when I felt that strange feeling, I began to cry. I cried quietly, and I remember. I don't want to wake Mom up as she was resting, but strangely, a wave of warmth overtook my body and I suddenly felt very tired. I'd stopped crying. It was almost as if something were there comforting me. Now that I'm older, I have a strong feeling that the warm presence was my late grandmother, who, by the way, I was close to. My mom eventually went to hospice care, and she passed away there. There was a thick heaviness on her last visit. "Do you know who Jesus is?" my aunt would ask. That day in the waiting room with all my family, when my aunt asked me that question, I knew what was next. Ever since my mom had passed, I've always felt a weird, different kind of presence in my house. As I lay in the empty, cold bed, I think of her as I fall asleep. Not long after I've fallen asleep, I woke to the feeling of my hair being tucked behind my ear. In my drowsiness, I'd forgotten all about Mom's passing. It was her. I saw her face and I felt her warmth and I went back to sleep. It wasn't until I was fully awake and aware later that day that I realized what had happened. I knew she was still with me. Fast forward a few years later, I'm 12 and I'm living in that same house. I'm asleep in my room when something wakes me up. The tapping sound at my door. I jolted out of bed and opened my door as fast as I could. Nothing but a cold draft met me. You see, that tapping was how my mom knocked on my door and get my attention. I'd shut myself in my room when I'd get upset. It was her gentle way of telling me that she was there if I needed to talk, which I never really did, especially when I was upset and when she was still alive. I wish I had. I've moved out of that house since, and I haven't had any more paranormal experiences. I'm almost sad that it's over. That's because I know that presence was my mom. I know she was telling me she was still there. I know she's still in that house with Grandma. The thing with no skin. I grew up in a haunted house. Rather, a haunted neighborhood. It's an old Air Force base that has since been recommissioned for college students and families that go to school on the outskirts of town. Growing up there, I had experienced many strange things, many of which I cannot explain besides it being paranormal. Even though I know a good bit about the paranormal or the occult, some of these entities proved to be out of my main knowledge base. I've seen my little sister's double, seen multiple shadow people in the house with a friend present, who quickly left after they all moved away at once, and had things move around, knocks on doors when no one else was home or asleep, footsteps up and down the hallway, conversations that would mute when you got close to them, and many other things. However, one of the creepiest ones always happened in the main bathroom. I had a small hallway branching from the main hallway. It wasn't very long, but I never felt safe there. During the night, even as a growing adult, I would just run as best as I could at night because I feared what was behind me. I slowly stopped doing so because I knew that whatever it was, I got some kind of pleasure from it, I think. Slowly started to not feel its presence near as much. I still think it was still there. One evening as I'm as I'm taking a shower, rather than talking to it, and I'm just getting ready for bed. I hear it knock, but not from the door. It came from the medicine cabinet. So being the curious fucker I am, I peeled back the shower curtain to see some of the fog having been wiped off the mirror. I started to take a closer look when I saw a black slanted eye with no skin around it start to peek its way into my line of sight. I quickly hopped back in the shower and sat back against the wall, not knowing what to do. Eventually turned the shower off and hauled ass out of there dripping wet. The next time I saw this thing, I was walking down the hall after getting home from school. I'm the only one home, so I start to do what male teenagers do when no one's around. Yucky. I hear some scuffling, like dogs running around, and a door open. I ready myself for somebody to be home, and as I walk out of my bedroom door, I hear a "Hey." It's sort of muted. It's not a voice I knew. So I started to make my way toward the front door with my back to the wall. As I felt I might need to dash back to my room for safety, my mistake here was that I was facing the hallway that leads to the bathroom. Move over bit by bit and I hear another voice. Seems to be coming from the living room. So I take another step. Then I see something in the corner of my eye, like a hand pulling from the corner. I couldn't make it out at the time, but it didn't really freak me out enough until I got it in full view of the hallway with this thing. It was standing there in a grotesque way. Black slanted eyes, no skin anywhere, black claws, and smelled something awful. More of rotting meat than rotten eggs. I froze for a second before I saw it flinch a little like it was coming for me. I dashed back to my room, slamming my door behind me only to get 3 knocks every few seconds. I don't remember what I said, but it was along the lines of, "I'm not going to be afraid of you, and you can get past this door." And then it stopped. I waited there until somebody got home, to which I went outside for the rest of the day, making sure I didn't have to use the restroom at night for any reason. A few months go by, and I'm still uncomfortable in this bathroom and hallway. But not much has really happened since, so my guard naturally starts to slip. One night, I do believe it was a Friday night, so I'm taking a late night shower. Everything's going as normal, wash the hair, face, and body, and that's when suddenly the lights go out. There was a storm going on in town, and we were getting the weak part of it, so didn't think much of it. Stepped out to turn on the lights and see if the house had power. Sure enough, the house did have power, but the bathroom wasn't turning on, yet the exhaust fan was still on. That's when I started to get really worried. Turned the lights on one more time, and with no avail, decided to keep my shower going in the dark. As I got back into the shower, I could feel something breathing on me. It was breathing on the back of my neck and my shoulders. Felt a few brushes of what I hoped was just my towel and not something else. As I'm getting out of the shower, I'm drying my hair off and the lights come on. Awesome, I'm thinking, as I start to dry my face. When I pull the towel off, I look up. Mirror once again doesn't have fog, but the whole lot of it, not just the corner. I looked up a little bit more and saw the thing there, right behind me, making a smile of sorts, but its mouth was sewn shut. Or so it seemed. Stood there for about 5 seconds, unable to move, before feeling its claw on my shoulder. It was closer to my neck. I was suddenly able to move, and again the bathroom dripping wet, running to my door. Slam it shut, shaken, trying to gather my nerves. I hear a deeper, high-pitched laughter, or both, and heard the bathroom door close. Went to bed that night with the lights on, all while hearing more footsteps than usual in the hallway. I've seen the thing thrice more, but thankfully none as scary as mentioned above, since I've learned to deal with it. And I've learned of ways to protect myself. Haven't heard much of a skinless humanoid, so this one is kind of stuck with me. Scariest besides being held against a wall from a vengeful ghost. The dark spot in the alley. About 10 to 12 years ago, I and my closest friends were staying the night at one of their houses. This is on an old Air Force base. Had many suicides and other things happen here, to which we still know not much of, even though it's come to be sort of apparent with things that we went through. One of my friends is also into the supernatural and occult and sort of meditation and in tune with nature. We were all sitting in the living room, TV off, when we heard a noise at the back glass door, so that happens to slide, like so many do. We all move cautiously over to check it out since, robbers and whatnot. One of my friends pulls the curtain away and we all freeze. It was like an eternity. We sat there in disbelief, and finally the question came, "Do y'all see what I'm looking at right now?" To which we all asked, "What exactly?" The girl with her face cut up. "Yeah, I see her." One by one answers. The friend lifting the curtain cuts back and asks what we should do. Well, I said that we don't have many resources to help out, but let's see if she's still there. Pull the curtain back one more time to see that she's moved toward the back end of the patio. Then slowly turns toward us, but not moving. We all freak out a little bit, or a lot rather, and try to relax on the living room, the furniture, discussing the situation. Next thing we know, a huge noise comes from the front door, and we gather in a stupid formation from sitting to half-sitting, ready to take on whatever's coming for us. The friend's house we were staying at comes through the front door with a giant dog. Comes to lick our faces while his mother looks at us like we're crazy. After this dog met us, he stood still, just like we had sooner, and jumped toward the back door. We knew what he was going at. He didn't bark, but only growled and moved from side to side of the door, like he was ready to pounce on something. The mother scowled at him a little while putting him on the leash and once again leaving, grabbing a few of her things. Once she left, everything felt, well, a little more normal. It was always a little weird, especially at night growing up at this place. It was a full moon, so I and my other intuitive friend decided to kind of meditate in the patio and see if we could feel or find what was going on. No one felt or saw the girl since the dog showed up, so we felt it was a good time for it. As we're doing our thing, I hear scurrying behind this back fence and it sounds like a bunny. Makes sense since we live outside the city and have much wildlife around. Then I hear it again, but this time I see the shadow of it moving through the fence. I don't say anything since my friend seems to have been all right and not heard anything. I hear and see it move a few more times, and then my friend asks me suddenly, "Did you hear that?" "Yeah, I have for a while now, just didn't think you did. I didn't want to distract you either. I was doing the same thing. See that dark spot on the other side of the fence?" Sure enough, there was a dark spot that had just zipped away once we got up to investigate. So we both noticed something was around, but didn't want to tell each other for some reason. Yet when we both came to the conclusion that there was definitely something, we both looked over the fence into the alley. Again, this was a night of a full moon, so you could see a good bit, especially being outside for the last 20 or 30 minutes. In the middle of the alley, we saw nothing, as in we saw a big blacker-than-black spot, at a center of more than black, and had a quote-unquote shadow of sorts that radiated off of it, sort of. Frozen for a second, we turned to each other, and we're just seeing the same thing, and sure enough, that spot is there, surrounded by moonlight and other things, with nothing to really give that kind of a shadow. My friend asks me to keep an eye on it. He grabs a garden trowel. It moves a little, and I see sort of a little shape to it. Still a black mass at this point. When my friend returns, he makes the note of it moving a little and asks if it changed shape. Tell him it had moved, but there was a funky shape but returned to a black mass. And suddenly, my friend throws the garden trowel at it, and it darts away. I've never seen something move so fast in my life, and it zigzagged along all the way from where I could tell. Next thing we know, all the dogs in the alley are going absolutely crazy. And that's when we knew that we weren't the only ones to see or feel this. We quickly ran inside after about 10 seconds of listening to angry dogs and the scurrying of whatever it was. We returned to retrieve the trowel to find it sticking headfirst in the ground, but nothing was on it. Then we presumed that whatever it was none of the normal world that we know. It, fleeing as it did, sort of threw us. It made us believe it was something paranormal and that we should find it again. Never have I seen that again, though. I'd like to, just so I could find out what it was. However, I've never seen such a dark mass in the midst of a full moon, especially with nothing to give it any shadow. It's a black mass I've seen before, though, but this time it was out in the open. I don't think it was related to what I saw before. We didn't sleep that night, though. Next morning when we went exploring, we kept hearing voices following us. We all went to our own places, but still sort of struck with some kind of awe, and for me, that was one friend, a sort of kind of inspiration. An inspiration to find out what it was that we saw that night. We hope to find out, but it may remain a mystery for a while. Until then, we shall discover other things, and explore other places. Gotta have a buddy system. (1-800-B000). It was the summer of 2012. Life was good. I was up at 2 a.m. watching Teen Nick in my house den. The whole house was always fascinating to me. One of the first houses built in our small town in Kansas was during Prohibition as a moonshiner's legal party house. The whole house is a sort of colonial style full of Victorian features. From the outside, it looks like a 2-story, but there's actually 3 floors and a half basement. The architecture was always confusing as to how this was accomplished. but wedged between the top and the main floor is a log cabin-themed room. It's our family room and den. It was a glorified bar room fitted with a monstrous fireplace, an Alaskan moose head from circa 1920, and a salvaged chandelier from the former Douglas Opera House. That's cool. I hated being alone in that room at night. That was because I always got a weird sensation, like someone standing over me. When I would try to sleep on the couch after a long night of TV, my best friend and I just felt like this time to Oh, I messed up. My best friend and I also felt like this time to time sleeping in my own bed, which used to be at the master suite. Never could get the cat or dog to hang out in the den, though. Its door was an inch thick of solid wood and had a very complex lock that remained tucked inside its latch. At no previous points had the owners had the key. We never bothered to close it, and it would get stuck in the frame because it was so heavy. Designed to keep the police out if someone sort of tipped off a booze party. There was a nursery on the top floor that shared a wall with this room, and it was sold to us with no doorknob to a small 4x10 room. This room became our home office. There was a brand new computer, an all-in-one printer and fax that remained unplugged and rarely used. My bedroom was right next to it, and I always slept with my door open. In the middle of the night, I could often see the computer light up and paper would cycle through the printer. Could never get myself to check it in the morning. When we looked at the sheets, there was nothing on them, and we'd load them back inside. It was my sister and I's favorite place to pirate scary movies. We would close the door so as not to disturb Mom and Dad because it didn't latch, but one night she left me in the room to go get a snack. When she came back, she couldn't open the door. I was trapped inside. My mom had to use a butter knife to force the handle, and I was shook given the timing. But back then, I'm sort of minding my teen Nick business when out of the blue I get a call from my friend. She tells me she's doing a Ouija board, which I've always done my part to stay far from. She says that her presence told her to call me. She informed me that I was wearing a black shirt, which I was, and I only own one. I hung up the call and immediately went to my bedroom to wait out for the next few hours to daylight. The same summer, my mom, grandma, sister, and I went on one late-night drive where we'd blast oldies cruising the back roads. As we're driving, an unidentifiable creature ran in front of our car and across the road. None of us agreed on what it was that we saw, though. We thought it was a very large white rabbit, cat, or small dog. It was moving unthinkably fast for any of those animals. We made it across the road in 2 hops. At the time, we joked about it and kept on our way. When we got home and stepped into the foyer, heavy work boots start down the upstairs hall and down the stairs. They stop at the den level, and from the foyer, you can see the part of the staircase that leads to the den. No one's there. We're all looking at each other, waiting for my father to continue his trip down the stairs, and he then comes up from the basement, followed by our dog. Cat's chilling in the window on the main floor. We sent him upstairs to investigate. He checked everywhere, even the attic. There's nothing. Could all be coincidence when we moved into an apartment that fall, and nothing else strange seemed to happen. I'm tempted to ask the family who lives there now if they've ever experienced anything. The original owners are buried in the morgue just down the street. Searching for advice. Long kept secret. Long post, but please read. So throughout my entire life, I've had many encounters with ghosts and shadow people. This includes voices calling out to me, seeing faces in the windows of my childhood home, and seeing and sometimes interacting with multiple different ghosts. There's a lot more, but I need to talk about a very specific event that happened when I was around the age of 6 or 7. My brother, 2 sisters, myself, and my dad were all sleeping in the living room together. My dad was on the couch, one sister was on the love seat. The other 2 were on the floor with me. Couldn't sleep that night, so I watched the disco ball ad for a nightlight spin. But at some point, the entire house became eerily quiet. Couldn't hear any noises from outside or anyone breathing around me, but all of a sudden I heard the deepest voice I've ever heard speak to me. There was no body, just a voice that came from all around me. The voice told me some things and warned me to never tell a soul what he said to me. I didn't sleep that night. Fast forward to May of 2020, and I'm working in Texas. Get my first nightmare since I was a kid, and I wake up to sleep paralysis. I feel a heartbeat or a chest moving from breathing against my back, and a familiar fear comes over me. I try to scream, but nothing comes out, and I slowly watch a long, dark hand move its way toward my neck. The hand stops, though. I can see a silhouette leaving the room. As soon as it leaves my body, I shoot straight up, finally awake, and I'm drenched in a cold sweat. I assumed that it was the same entity from before. I'm not really sure. Never told anybody what he said to me. It hasn't spoke to me since. Haven't actually had contact with him until last year, but I always feel like he's never too far away. Anybody know what he may be? I also have a lot more stories. A friend of mine thinks I'm connected to the spirit world somehow. Thanks for taking the time to read this, and please share any thoughts you may have. And if you need to, I can try to elaborate better on the specifics. I saw my relative in a dream shortly before they passed. This happened in 2020. I had a granduncle who lived in a different country than mine, very fond of my immediate family. I had, however, never had the opportunity to meet him in person. I'd only ever interacted with him through emails and Facebook. I only knew what he looked like through family photos and his pictures on social media. He had, however, often expressed wishes for me to visit him in his country. That way we could go out to some of his favorite restaurants, so he could cook for me, etc. The chance never arose. One night I'm having a pretty random dream, but among other things, I remember seeing my granduncle in that dream. And this was weird because not only do I rarely, if ever, even dream of family, but I had never ever dreamt about him before. And I'd never ever dreamt of any family whom I hadn't met in person. In my dream, it was Christmas already, though my dream was in early September. I was walking down a long dark road. It was lit only by the light of a row of cottages on the side, which, by the way, is not the style of housing and architecture in my country, so it was clearly not even me walking in my own country. Despite the road being dark and empty, I wasn't afraid. I was pretty relaxed while walking. A car drove past me slowly, and again I didn't feel the slightest fear. The window rolled down, and I saw my granduncle sitting near the window. He glanced at me, looking just like himself in family photos. He seemed calm as I called out to him. Then he looked around and ahead, and the car went on far off. I continued walking, feeling just fine. The next day, our family got news of his passing. I wonder if the dream had been his way of saying goodbye to me and making peace with not having had the chance to meet me in real life. I didn't believe in ghosts until my family bought a house. My family and I had moved to a different state and bought a house. I no longer live there, but I definitely remember a few odd things that happened while living there. Our house was built in the 70s and was a fixer-upper. Husband and wife had lived there, and a few years prior to us moving in, the wife had died of cancer. Didn't know this until after I had my first paranormal experience at that house. That's because my parents thought my sister and I would be scared if we knew somebody had died at the house. My friend found out online that the lady had died in her home by Googling her name. My first experience is when I was in the basement doing my makeup. We were renovating the upstairs bathroom, so I had to use the one downstairs. When I was putting on mascara and close to the mirror, I saw a black figure in the corner of my eye. It was like a person was standing right behind me, and it felt like there was a dark presence. Turned around, and there was literally nothing behind me. Does anyone know the significance of this dark figure? Still not sure what it was to this day. The second experience I had was when I was sleeping in the basement because we had family visiting and my grandma was sleeping in my bed. It was past midnight, and I swear I could hear running back and forth in the hallway upstairs. I have 2 cats, but both of them were sleeping downstairs with me. Went upstairs to check and everyone was dead asleep. I continued to hear the stomping for about an hour. I remember it being really hard to fall asleep that night. The last experience I had was the scariest. My sister and I had a friend over and we were chatting about how we thought our house was haunted. My sister always complained to me about how she would hear footsteps in her room, which was weird to me because I had never heard anything, specifically in my room. We all decided to lay in my bed and see if we could hear anything. We're all in about 8th grade or so of course we're doing dumb stuff like this. And we were silent maybe for minutes on end, and then we heard a huge sound, like something was throwing something off my nightstand. It was the craziest thing. None of us had moved a muscle. We heard that huge sound out of the blue. We looked on the floor, nothing had been knocked onto the ground, and it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. My dad never believed us when he said that we thought it was haunted. However, there was one time he was inside the house alone and said he heard the cupboards in the kitchen opening and closing while he was in the basement. He then came outside to ask us if any of us were doing dishes. We said no, and he thought it was weird, but then just, dismissed the whole thing. These were weird experiences, but I never felt unsafe. Maybe some spirits were mad that we were renovating the house. Not sure. Let me know if you've had any similar experiences. My first paranormal experience. I'd tried living with each of my parents, but things didn't really work out. So I started looking for a place to live. The only place that was available at the time was a room in a guest house on the outskirts of town. I got a bike to cycle to work, but kind of got help to move my things in and I settled in. I felt independent, all grown up and pleased as a punch. I'd been living there for a couple of weeks, maybe months. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, but one night things changed. I was tired. I went to bed early. Had no problems falling asleep, but woke up at some point in the night unexpectedly. I assumed nature had called, so I went to the bathroom. Got back in bed and drifted off again. I was having a perfectly normal dream when suddenly I heard a noise in the real world that woke me up. Found myself lying flat on my back, and with the duvet folded neatly half down the bed. I can't see properly without my glasses, but I thought I could see someone standing by my bed. Put on my glasses, and to my horror, I realized that there was someone in my room. Standing over my bedside, it was right there looking down at me and making this terrible noise. That's the noise that had woken me up. Then I realized that I could see the light from the outside through this thing. Slipped off the end of my bed to run to the door, only to realize that it was locked. The keys were on the bedside cabinet. I looked back to find the thing looking back at me. It was a dark shape, and although I could barely make out the features, I could see its mouth gaping open. The noise was like a long and loud gasping sound. It's as if the thing was trying to draw breath to speak, but it was incessant. I turned on the main light on the wall beside the door out of my room. The shape was still there, but it began to fade and the noise began to drop. Eventually, the shape was gone, The noise continued after, but stopped, and the room, which was icy cold despite me being against the radiator, started to warm up. I stood there maybe an hour or more, trying to explain away what I'd just seen and heard, but I couldn't. I did get back into bed at some stage, but I left all the lights on and didn't sleep. The next night, the landlord complained to me for leaving all the lights on, but I didn't tell him why, and I swore I'd never tell anyone. It must have looked terrible as everybody in work asked me if I was okay. When I saw my dad later that day, he even said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." But that's when I broke down. I told him what had happened and expected him to laugh or get angry, but instead he told me about things that he and other family members have seen in their lives. Well, then of course he asked if I was okay. So the next experience is what turned out to be sort of a haunted guest house. I was living in it, and the story goes as follows. A night or two after the first experience with what I believe was an adult male, but possibly something far more malevolent, I awoke to hear noise in my room. I put on my glasses to investigate. As I sat up in bed with them on, I could see a small figure about the size of a child, standing at the end of my bed facing the wardrobe and looking up at a poster I had on the wardrobe door. I could make out a kind of fringe, a nose and a chin as the light from outside was coming through the window behind him. I sat upright with my glasses on and just watched him quietly. I didn't feel threatened like I had with the other ghost or entity, and it just seemed curious of the poster. I turned on the bedside lamp to see if I'd still be able to see him, but he was gone, and that was that. The poster, by the way, good, I was going to ask, was for a Japanese manga-style video game called Oni, which oddly is Japanese for ghost or demon. As I later learned, I still have the poster in the original cardboard tube it was posted in from the UK, but I've never had it up on any wall in my room since, and I don't think I ever will. Blue Lady in a Yorkshire mining village. When I was young, my family and I moved to a small former mining village in Leeds, that's in West Yorkshire. The house was small, but didn't have any adverse history that we could find, nor did we hear anything from the neighbors. We settled in comfortably, but noticed that pictures wouldn't stay hung on the wall, and the house was a pain to heat up. On 2 occasions, I experienced what I presumed to be ghosts in that house. The first, my parents were downstairs watching TV, and so I went upstairs to watch a video in their room. We didn't have VHS or DVD players in our bedroom at the time. And as I got to the top of the stairs, I saw 3 sort of dresses, and they were dancing on their own without hangers. Stepped into the room, and it felt really cold. And then the dresses fell to the floor. That was terrifying. I was only about 8 or 9, too. The second event, I was in my bedroom falling asleep, and I think I was ill at the time, and a woman came to my bedroom door looking in on me to make sure I was okay. She was wearing glasses and had a kind face. I was so out of it I didn't pay attention much at first to her, until she walked into the room properly, and I saw she was in an Edwardian dress and looked very transparent and blue. The house was built around the same, or I guess that's called the turn of the century. It was one of a row of mine managers' cottages, so this fits. She smiled at me and walked back to the doorway and then through the wardrobe opposite into the house next door. It was a long terrace row. I asked my neighbors if anybody in the street knew who she was, and they all knew was other children had seen her before, so I guess other children had seen this woman before. And she checked in on them one night and saw them walking through the walls into the next house. Knew something I couldn't have. When I was a teenager, I would go to summer camp for a week, and at this camp you weren't allowed a cell phone, no computers or any other form of outside contact allowed. After dropping off kids, parents could go write postcards that the camp staff would hand out throughout the week to make younger kids feel like they were hearing from their parents throughout the week. But in reality, all the postcards were written the first day of camp. All this to say, while at the camp I had zero outside contact, even with my parents. I had a great week, and soon enough it was time for my mom to pick me up. We walked to the car casually, just catching up about my week and hers, and she then very excitedly brings up a Rotary meeting she had attended on Tuesday of that week. Camp goes from Sunday to Sunday. She started saying that they had a guest speaker, and I, sort of annoyed, cut her off because she had already told me this. Being a moody teenager, I was annoyed and grumpily said something like, "Mom, you already told me about your guest speaker who studied abroad in Israel, and how you think I should apply for the program that she did." My mom stared at me, clearly freaked out. She then reiterated that this meeting had occurred while I was at camp. Therefore, I couldn't possibly have known about it. When we got home, we looked through all of our texts and our emails to see if, that had been mentioned of, this guest speaker, and there hadn't been any mention of it. Falling over myself. She was a last-minute addition to the meeting, so my mom didn't know she was coming until that day. And we still have no explanation, and since that event, my mom's told me that as a kid I would do stuff like that a lot. My dad's side of the family is Cherokee. I've always had really good intuition. My grandpa, for example, knew his mom had died before being told. And going back further, that mother, my grandmother, who I never met, had apparently predicted things all the time. True supernatural encounters. When I was about 5, that was the first time I remember. My parents had claimed that toys would play without batteries, and my mom was paralyzed in bed with a skeleton leaning over her. But that was after they changed rooms with me, because I still remember clearly a giant white face coming out of my wall and speaking garbled language. Couldn't understand, so I asked my mom, and of course she was freaking out. Next is a more recent one. A year or two ago, I was in the bathroom at about 3:46. There's a gecko screaming above me. And then there was a banging on the bathroom door, and being the scaredy cat I was, I left open just a crack. So I peered through, and I saw frickin' tentacles slithering away. Next morning, I called my grandma, and she said the night before, my 5-year-old cousin said that he saw a big statue. And the statue had tentacles coming out of the ceiling above his bed. When I went to Colorado, they had us use dowsing rods on a ghost tour, and I asked if Slender Man was real. I don't want anybody to freak out, because this is real. But so is Slender Man, fellas. Not really. Another that is 1 or 2 years is my baby sister would start screaming when we tried to go in the hallway because of the black dogs in there. Nah, fam, not too much for me. Final story, my mom said, is an ancient Indian demon. I know this has all happened because my great-great-great-grandma got cursed by a witch. The demon that I'd like to think is a Wendigo would always call my name. Malarkey. Spooky. Or if it wanted me to come to it, I would sound like my mom or grandma. When I was waiting to get picked up outside of school, I was the last one when I think I heard my mom yell my name. Malachi Jackson. I was glad that she was there, but she wasn't. It also happens in my house. Brought this up to my 7th grade Spanish teacher who believes that stuff, and she said 100% Wendigo. She thinks it lives in the woods, and thinking back, the school I went to happened to have woods right by it. My house, same scenario. If you've read this far, I pray you believe, because I'm not trying to scare you or trick you. I just want the world to understand that us even existing is insane, so God could easily let ghosts and monsters exist. Want the world to know, but not to be afraid. They feed off of fear and energy. There are some ghosts that aren't real, that can sort of look like people or black clouds, but they're just really negative energy, and that's why it happens mostly when people are mad or fight. My mom moved a bottle with her mind because she was in a fight with my ex-stepdad. Focused for hours, only did it once. I'm gonna stare at a glass for a while. Without a reflective surface, of course. Sweet dreams.